Hello and welcome to #EventIcons, where you get to chat with the icons of the events industry. My name is Alex Plaxton. I am your host today. I'm joining you from just outside of Washington, D.C. I am with Little Bird Told Media, and today we're going to be talking about C2, which is Commerce Plus Creativity. It's an iconic event which started in Montreal. You've probably heard C2 Montreal, and it has taken the idea world of event profs by storm. Why? A certain je ne sais quoi, a deep commitment to taking risks with format, program, and experiences, and sponsors who understand it is about experience and not logo. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We cannot wait to delve into the awesomeness that is C2 and hear from their leadership more about their approach and what we can expect next. So let's get to it.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #EventIcons,
presented by Endless Events.
The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. Use the question panel on the webinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter. Submit your questions with #EventIcons.
We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show.
Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share #EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook.
Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is #EventIcons.
First, I would like to introduce our guest today. Julia Cyboran is the VP of Marketing and Audience at C2 Montreal and C2 International. Julia has led audience acquisition, performance marketing, social media, communications, editorial content, graphic design, branding, participant experience, and public relations for the organization. So pretty much everything.
Not really.
Thank you for joining us today, Julia.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. That's quite a wonderful introduction. It's amazing to hear other people talk about what sometimes we do with much passion and with almost a little bit of humble pie as well, because we're creating something and we don't always see the impact we have on others. So it's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a first timer on the show, I want to start off with the questions we ask all of our first timers. And that is, what got you into the events industry? And if you weren't in the events industry, what would you be doing?
Well, I was drawn to C2 Montreal a little bit over a year ago. So I'm relatively new to the events industry, but in many ways, events were never far from my life before. I come from the media industry, and events were always a big part of bringing our brands to life. So what drew me to coming to C2 and working in the events industry was the human connections that we make in events. In a world that is becoming more and more digital, working at C2 allows us to actually connect with human beings and create real life experiences and meet new people. So many of the things that are part of our DNA and our methodology as an event company are also many of the reasons that drew me to this industry and to this role.
And what would you be doing if you weren't working for C2 right now?
That's a really tough question. I would probably be doing something that has as much as an adrenaline high as working in the event industry does. And hopefully doing something that's just as creative and working with such interesting teams as well. So one specific job, I don't know, but I would know what the criteria would have to be.
Absolutely. Now, for those who are watching at home or in their office, on Facebook or on our website, event-icons.com, please feel free to join the conversation. If you have any questions for Julia throughout the show, just post it in to the chat, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can in the hour. But we do have some questions prepared for you. So I did want to talk, you've been 7 years now in Canada, which is amazing. Congratulations. For new events to get to that point, it's definitely worth celebrating. But you've also been expanding through both your own events and through partnerships bringing that C2 magic to IMEX, for example. For those in the events industry, I'm sure we've all heard of IMEX. You've announced a partnership with them. Tell us more about what's going on with this expansion.
Well, I mean, C2 is going to be preparing its 8th edition this year. So, we're, as you said, a young organization, and we were definitely born out of the idea that we needed to sort of rethink the business conference in many ways, and how we connect with people and how we learn and how we be inspired. So our founders, almost 8 years ago now, over a glass of wine, were like, we got to do things differently. And you know what? I guess that they weren't the only ones that had that perspective on our industry. And in many ways, the little bit of magic that we've been able to create at C2 Montreal almost became something that people wanted a piece of for their own organizations and their own ways of doing things. So in many ways, our growth has been organic, in the sense that we were a team, as I mentioned earlier, almost of humble beginnings, who really wanted to make a change and perhaps also draw some attention and highlight the talent and know-how of people in Montreal. And it just sort of started spreading. And in many ways, it was, people kind of got what we were doing. And in 2014, with C2 International, we started finding new ways of creating events for partners. And we've really been fortunate enough to do it both here in Montreal for private partners, as well as across the globe. And being able to work with an organization like IMEX has also given us much more exposure to a variety of other people across the globe. So naturally, one of our big goals is to, really focus on delivering an incredible C2 flagship every year in Montreal, but then to also work very closely with corporations and organizations to bring a little bit of that methodology to their events, to help them empower their participant base to learn differently, to be inspired, and to connect it in an environment that really puts human relationship first and foremost.
It's really interesting. Now, I know from the event professionals perspective, two of our hosts, our co-hosts of the EventIcons show, Will and Takira, have both been to C2 and can't stop raving about it. I know a lot of event professionals that this event is, one of their bucket list items. And I think that comes down to, that human connection, because I think for a lot of event professionals, that's why we love this industry so much. But I think it also comes down to that wow factor that you present. Every year participants know they'll be wowed, but they never know exactly how. So how do you decide what stays, what's new, or does anything stay at all from the previous year?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of our chief creative officer, but having had the fortune to be in many meetings with her and her team and listen to how they think, I think a lot of it comes down to how our teams can create an environment that allows people to connect, that challenges them and takes them out of their comfort zone, but that also is really well designed to help answer some of the challenges in business today. So the team has such a great way of sitting down and sort of asking the questions as to what are some of the issues that business leaders are facing, and how can we develop various collaborative experiences or experiential brainstormings, or add certain aspects to the environment design that will, create metaphors or connect to some of those challenges that are going on. And I think every year that work starts very early on, and C2 Montreal and the site and how we work with it really allows us to kind of build and deploy all of that work, and then sort of live it for real with the participants. So it's not so much a process where we decide what stays and what goes or what we reinvent, but the theme acts as like a guiding light to the creative process. But then at the end of the day, it's all about putting the needs of our participants and the questions that they're asking at the core of the decision making, and then creating an event around all of those issues that are present in business today.
Now, you mentioned the team, and I do want to talk a bit about that. What can you tell us about the team? What is the key to building an event like this? The right internal team and having the right partners is extremely important. I think we all recognize that. How does your team work, and how do you work together?
Well, I think what's really, really awesome about working at C2 is the variety of people that are on the team. We have people from such a varied background, from Jennifer, our chief creative officer, who's worked at places like Cavalia, which is a touring show and has a huge background in creativity and creation and shows, to our VP of production, who has tons of experience from Cirque du Soleil, to our teams that have lots of experience in creative methodologies, to some of the artistic programming people that are former artists themselves, to the people in our partnership team that come from, the hospitality industry. So it takes a village. And I think the C2 team is very representative of that, is that every single individual brings their passion and their dedication to our mission to the table. And then we're all laser focused on delivering something that will bring our participants one step further every year. So, C2 couldn't happen with just one person alone. It's every single individual in this office, and then all of the contract workers that come on board as we get closer to the event, that really help make all of that magic happen. And it's such a collaborative thing to build. And in many ways, we have to walk the talk, and we talk about collaborative experiences and human connections and communication. And those are the things that we need to put into place to build something that is what it is for the people that come to our events.
That's great. And I'm glad you also mentioned the other staff, the contract staff.
Yeah.
For your event, you have more on-site concierge staff than any other event I think we've ever come across or talked about on the show. I think, Tahira was doing some research, and I think she heard that more than 400 concierge staff for just over 4,000 participants. Is that right? That seems like so many.
It's actually, we have about 7,000 participants and 500 volunteers plus concierge staff. So, one of the things that we're very cognizant of is that human aspect makes a big difference for C2. And it's very important for us to offer a level of service that really allow people to enjoy the event and not be worried about where they're going and what they're going to be doing. So it's really a huge part of the USP, I guess, of the C2 way of doing things. And it's not so much about the ratio of volunteer or concierge to participant, but really more about us understanding what the pain points are for the participant and finding ways to solve that. And naturally, as sites evolve or things evolve in terms of what we do, that service offering evolves as well. But it's really about understanding, what do people need so that the event feels seamless, so that those irritants are out of the way, so that they can enjoy the speakers that are present, the experiential brainstormings that we build, the collaborative methodologies and experiences, or just sit down in the village and have a glass of wine and speak to someone that they might have met just walking around the site. So we want to be able to make all of that stuff that kind of gets in your way from enjoying your event kind of disappear. So it's really a big part of what we do, and it's important that that's kind of baked into the thought process of how we do things as well.
And I'm glad you mentioned that it's not so much about the ratio, because I think for some of our our viewers who are like, gee, I wish I could afford to have that kind of ratio. Mm-hmm. That it's not just about the ratio. It really is about finding those pain points, and that's scalable, right? Yes,
it definitely is. But you have to have your ear to the ground. You have to understand what it is that makes something enjoyable or irritant, and then work to solve that problem. And you have to be creative about that. Business is complex these days in our event business, and we know that there are staffing costs and whatnot. So it's really important that we think about, at the end of the day, what's going to actually make a difference for the human being who's at our event. And a big part of what we try to do at C2 is think about that individual, about the participant. And I keep on talking about participant as opposed to attendee or delegate, because we really see the individuals that come to C2 as participating in the experience with us. So we have to really keep them at the core of what we're doing, and making sure that we're making it as easy as possible and as enjoyable as possible for them at all times.
And that's very much a strategic decision too, and a strategic plan. I don't think it's just throwing people at the problem, right?
No, it's not. And it's not, definitely not throwing people at the problem. I think it's understanding what we do, what people want out of it. It's it's really strategic in every aspect of how we do it. And it's something that we spend a lot of time looking at and analyzing and thinking about, and really trying to understand what the behaviors are. How can we leverage data to understand that more? Like it's a crucial part of what we do. And imagining ourselves in the shoes of someone who's on the ground at our event, like what do they need to do so that they also get the most out of it? Because we also are very cognizant that the business leaders that are coming to our event and the change makers and the innovators, they've got really busy schedules. So if they're going to carve out 3 days or even 1 day from their sort of regular week of meetings and whatnot, it has to be hours and days that are well spent. That it shouldn't be them worrying about where they're going to go next or where the washrooms are. It's about them really maximizing their time on site so that they're really having an awesome time.
So I heard you mention data, and I imagine that there's a lot of real-time data that you're collecting.
Mm-hmm.
How do you collect that data, and how do you decide what data matters to you, and what do you want to know about the participants?
Data, one of my favorite topics. I'm a real data nerd, so you're speaking to the right person. Not everyone is as data oriented as I am, but there are lots of us at C2. I think the important thing for us is to understand, like, what questions does the data answer? So data in and of itself can become excessively overwhelming if you don't turn to it to try to solve some real life problems. So for us, understanding what people like, where they are, how the flow is happening, making sure again that we are answering some of their needs when they're on the site. So not, as a marketer, data-driven strategies are very important to how I connect to potential audiences and how I engage with our current audiences. In many ways, we try to use some of those fundamentals as well to enhance or to improve or to evolve the experience as well. So, like so many companies, we're still trying to wrap our heads around exactly how you use data. But I think the first thing that we try to do is not to let the data overwhelm us, but to really use it as a way to help guide us and validate perhaps some of our instincts or force us to pose questions on things that we would have never questioned before, and use the data as our friend as opposed to our foe.
Now, what are some techniques that you use to collect that data? Because I know a lot of event professionals I talk about, it's surveys and that kind of stuff. Is that something that you're using, or are you?
We definitely use technology in various sources. We have the ability through multiple on-site technology to understand where people are on the site. We also, of course, use surveys both during the event and post-event to really understand appreciation. We also try to connect all of that into a lot of the social media data. We're very fortunate that our community is very much engaged with our event during the event on social, so that gives us a lot of insight as well. So it's kind of collecting all of the data touch points as well as the content that they're consuming on our website and on our newsletters to really start building a portrait of what people are liking and what is driving them and versus what is perhaps interesting them less, and really start building a portrait of what their journey with us looks like and how can we enhance that to make it an even more fulfilling experience.
See, you mentioned social media, so now you're speaking my language. When it does come to social media and data collection, are you looking at just, before? Because one of the things I've noticed about C2 is it is something that people talk about year round.
Yes.
Are you looking at the data beforehand when you're making the decisions about what's going to happen next year? Or is it just something that you're looking at on site and after the event?
Oh, we're always looking at the data. It's important that we keep a check on our data at all times. And, a big part of my role here at C2 is understanding that data and how that data speaks about what our audience likes and dislikes. So it's very important that we don't see the event within a bubble, but we actually exist 365 days a year. So there needs to be a lot of listening that happens all the time. And, things are constantly evolving and changing in our world. So it's really critical for us to keep that connection going and to really be present in the data space and using what we're collecting regularly to understand, what's going on and hopefully use that insight as much as possible to improve the work that we're doing.
Great. So let's talk commerce. This is a key reason for face-to-face meetings. How are you enabling commerce at the event?
Well, the entire environment design of C2 was put together to encourage people to have conversations. I mentioned about the notion of getting people out of their comfort zone. Well, one of the first things we try to do is to actually get people to talk, So our collaborative experiences, what we call labs, our experiential brainstormings, are built with the moderators and our teams here to force people to have conversations and to meet new people. Our badges in and of themselves, which are the click badges, allow people to exchange connections, but this site is made in such a way that people can actually talk. And I think one of the big factors that makes C2 so unique is that people actually do business at C2. We do studies on that. We understand that people are actually, closing deals or finding new leads at C2. And it's a big part of it. Yes, people are coming to learn new things and to discover new things and to be inspired, but they're also coming to connect with people. And a big part of that too is that C2 is not just a tech conference or not just a marketing conference. It's a conference, it's a business conference that's aimed at the notion of cross-pollination. So we can have people from finance and people from technology having a conversation with someone who's doing a startup that's based on an artistic program. And, the sky's the limit. And one of the most beautiful things is the amount of industries that are present. There are over 34 industries present at C2. And it means that those people are colliding and having conversations. And oftentimes that's where some of the most interesting business conversations and business deals can come from, because you're meeting someone that you might not meet in your everyday. And the environment is thought of in that way. We want there to be places where people can have those conversations, where there's this notion as well of a certain amount of not necessarily intimacy, but proximity between people. And, our creative team works so hard, our environmental design team, to build something that responds to those needs.
So what does success look like from a commerce perspective?
I think success from a commerce perspective for our participants is them meeting people that are going to help them drive their business forward. And it doesn't always necessarily mean signing a deal, but it could also mean meeting someone who's going to, inspire you in a different way, or look at problems differently, or have conversations when you go back to the office with your teams about new ways of doing things. So I think it's really for us about empowering our participants to come up with new solutions to the business challenges in front of them, and be it by signing a nice deal while they're sitting on one of our terraces, or coming back with a takeaway that helps them perhaps optimize their teams or re-inspire motivation with their employees. So it's really multiple factors, but one of the important things for us is to help drive business forward, and that's how we measure success.
That's great. And I know you mentioned a bit about the audience and what that audience looks like. Mm-hmm. What do they get the most from attending C2? Who are you building your program to attract?
Well, a lot of the profile of the participants at C2 they're really varied, as I said, from lots of industries and from over 60 countries. And one of, I think, the common threads with these people is there are people who want to drive business forward. So they can be people in director plus positions, or VPs, or people in the C-suite, or entrepreneurs, or innovators, or people that are in the early stages of their career that are trying to launch something. But the thread through all of it is that there are people who want to meet new people and drive change and have conversations and make an impact on business today. So, it's not one specific person. When I close my eyes, I don't imagine John Smith in the corner office. I see a multitude of people who want to do business differently and want to meet new people and are the innovators and the leaders and want to connect to those new ideas. And it can be someone in a more traditional field that knows that they need to sort of inject some new energy into their business, to someone who's just starting as a new entrepreneur and wants to understand how they can use some new methods to kind of build a more efficient business. But it's all about people who are looking to face transformation and change head on, who want to also be with like-minded people to drive that forward, and also connect with people from different industries. People that aren't afraid to get out of their comfort zone and meet new people and try new things.
Now, I'm going to ask you about a data point. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but I'm curious because you're now planning the 8th C2 Montreal.
Yes.
And I imagine with so many changes year after year that for you guys, attracting return participants versus new participants are kind of different challenges.
Yes.
So what can you tell me about, like, what percentage of your participants are brand new? This is the first time they're coming to C2 Montreal, and how many are coming back for, the second, third, fourth, eighth time?
Exact statistics, I don't know to the number, but I can give you some anecdotal information that might help give some context to it without giving precise numbers. But we're very fortunate is that we do have a lot of return visitors at C2. It's not like people come once and never come again. I think there's a little bit of an addictive factor to it, to be immersed in such a creative environment where you never know what's going to happen year after year. There's something really compelling and exciting about that. So we have the fortune of not having a huge amount of churn versus a lot of other industries. People do come back. Maybe they don't come back every year, but there is this notion of loyalty and return visitors. And in terms of new people, I mean, I think we know that we have new people because we have been growing year after year. Every year has been a little bit bigger than the previous one. So I think some of our biggest challenges is understanding what the participant life cycle is and what are they getting out of it and what do they need to get out of it in the future so that we keep on responding to some of their needs. I think the goal isn't to be super mathematical about churn in and churn out, but to more really understand the participant needs. And sometimes there might be just an evolution to the individual. Their role has changed, they're in a different industry, and perhaps their business need is different. So at the end of the day, I think it's about us really making sure that we're responding to the needs of the types of people that come to C2 and the new types of people that will come to C2, and ensure that we're fulfilling that need and we're bringing new interested people into our ecosystem to kind of keep that flow going.
And have you seen those needs kind of evolve? Obviously you've only been with them a short time, but what have you heard about how those needs have changed over the years?
Well, as a Montrealer, I've known about C2 since it started and attended it in the past. I think we can see by some of the topics that we're covering, the things that we've added. The AI forum that we started 2 years ago is something that came out of a result of evolutions in business and challenges that business leaders needed to address head on. And 2018, this year's edition, we launched a hub around digital creativity, because we know that it's an important conversation that's really driving a lot of the business in Montreal, but also across the globe in terms of like digital effects and whatnot. So it's about having our ear to the ground on the topics that are relevant to business and making sure that we bring in new methodologies to help us approach those things. So it's definitely a job that our programming and our content and creation team do to make sure that the topics continue to remain relevant and continue to inspire business leaders, and that we're also asking the tough questions around business and bringing in those key voices as well. So, I think, in Canada, we've just gone through the legalization of cannabis. So for us as a Canadian-based event, it was very important that there were lots of voices around that industry at C2 just this past year, because this is going to be a big change for a lot of people in business in Canada. So it was important that we not only had someone like Snoop Dogg, who's seen as a leader and venture capitalist in that industry, but also people that are doing business in Canada around it. So it's about us making sure that our team is connecting to the relevant conversations both now and sort of looking out into the next year or 18 months as to what's going to be important to them and business leaders then.
Great. Now, kind of switching gears a little bit, I think we can't talk about C2 without talking about creativity. Mm-hmm. And, for a lot of people, they do associate C2 with Cirque and your relationship with them. What can you tell us kind of about what that relationship is like, how that kind of came about? I know one of your co-founders was, a part of that.
Yeah.
And how does that influence the conference?
Well, definitely creativity is in our DNA. Both of our co-founders, one is an executive at Cirque and one is an executive at Sidley, which is a creative agency. Both of them had creativity in their blood. So I think it comes from there, and naturally Cirque du Soleil has remained a close partner of C2 Montreal. We are an independent organization, and that's very important to note. But of course, there is a lot of the creative ethos and the notion of artistic performances that come into what we do. We are a conference with artistic programming, so we do have the fortune of having some of the artists from Cirque du Soleil grace our conference stages. For those people who are listening who haven't been to C2, oftentimes the transitions between speakers or blocks are done with artists on the stage, be they dancers or circus artists or acrobats or just lovely, lovely performers that actually help add to the atmosphere of C2 and enrich it. Sometimes I think we forget how important performance art is at opening up your eyes and your mind and making you live emotions. So of course, in many ways, we've been influenced by one of our founders and one of our partners and bringing a lot of that creative ethos to what we do. But of course, it doesn't just end with performance art. There's lots of visual art on site during C2, and even the environment design is always created with this notion of creativity and challenging our eyes and our intellect in mind. So, creativity really is part of who we are, and we try to do things in that way. And I think we can't forget how important creativity and being exposed to things that make you look at the world perhaps like this or like that are to thinking differently,
And what kind of feedback do you get from participants about how that changes the way that they experience the event?
Well, I think that's a really important part of what we do, and I think it also helps to unwind the atmosphere a little bit. So one of the examples I'm thinking of is during C2 this year, we have there was a cast of performers coming around, and they were doing the death of the cell phone, and they were having like funeral of the cell phone. So all of a sudden you'd be walking around the site and someone would break out into operatic song, putting into the coffin their cell phone. And it's almost ways that help like break the atmosphere and create a moment of conversation for you to look at the person next to you and be like, dude, that's really funny. Or, it adds a level that all of a sudden kind of like breaks down that wall and makes it a totally different experience. And those are things that our director of artistic programming pulls up. Like, it's amazing the things that he thinks of, but it just adds something to the experience that you're living, a sense of unexpectedness, a sense also of, it relaxes you. It kind of takes you out of being so serious all the time and approaching the event differently. So that's a big part of what C2 is about.
Yeah, it sounds like it just adds a completely new dimension to the event.
Totally. Definitely it does. And it just, I don't know, it's a great conversation starter too,
For me, I go to a lot of conferences and that kind of thing. Like, whenever there's a surprise and delight moment or something that's unexpected, it just always kind of shocks your system and brings you back into what you're experiencing.
It keeps you on your toes. It keeps you engaged. The notion of surprise and delight as well is really important. And I think also just it's part of who we are. Like, sometimes I think we forget just how different it is because we couldn't do things any other way,
Yeah. Now, I think what's also interesting is that the creativity is not just in performance, but also in how you conduct your meetings at the show. I've seen the pictures of meetings suspended in midair and on swings and plexiglass platforms and in rooms filled with smoke. And, I think we've all started to hear these stories coming out of C2. That's all experience design. What can you tell us about these choices and how this came about?
So our collaborative experience team that develops a lot of these experiential brainstormings that we've coined labs, because they're kind of like labs of ideas. They're really built with a problem to solve in mind. So if we think about, we had a lab at C2 this year that was called Transparent, that was essentially a room all in mirrors, wherein people had to sit down and have a conversation about how quite often we pass judgment on people or situations very quickly without going a layer deeper. So these aren't just beautifully designed areas. They're also, we work closely with facilitators and methodologies to help people pose real questions that they're facing in their everyday lives, or that they might face in the future, in the near future. So it's definitely part of how the team designs things, and they need to be beautiful and engaging and wonderful, but there also needs to be thought behind it. So our Sky Lab, where we hoist people 30 feet up in the air, is about taking people out of those challenge zones and having people sort of be on the precipice of something and have to have conversations about things that they might not do when they have their feet on the ground, or, you know, seeing the world from different perspectives as well. So naturally, there are facilitators that accompany participants in all of these various labs and help them bring their thought process 1 or 2 steps further while they're there. So they don't just look cool, they actually have a meaning behind them.
I think that's important to realize, especially when we talk about experience design. I think oftentimes when you think about creativity and the reason for doing something, I think sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and we're like, oh, well, that just, it's cool, or it looks cool. But there really is strategy behind that. And I think that's really interesting.
It's important that there be substance with what we do, because if our goal at the end of the day is to help inspire and empower business leaders to face the challenges of tomorrow and transformation head on, we can't leave them empty. We have to actually give them something that's going to nourish their brains and their soul and help them do what they need to be doing in their everyday. So the notion of finding solutions and bringing a methodology and having a thought process behind it is really key to what the teams here are building, and a credit to every single individual who works on those. It's just absolutely brilliant what they do every year.
Now I have to ask, you don't just throw people into the air. There's got to be, and hope that this has some substance and works. I imagine you've got to prototype these experiences before you launch them at C2. What's that process like?
I mean, I can't speak for all of the details of the team that works on them, but I do see them. I'm just looking over because I see where they sit now. There's definitely an iterative process to what they're doing, and they could bring definitely more insight to it. But it's not just like, I think that's going to work. There's definitely a lot of thought, a lot of testing, a lot of iterating, a lot of viewing what's going on, how different challenges and theories can help answer other things. So it takes us a year to build them, and it's not just because they take a lot of energy to build and wood and nails. It's because it takes a huge amount of thought process behind how are we going to do something that accomplishes X or Y. So I know that, they're off, they try it out on staffers. There's different conversations that are had. So there is a method to the madness.
Now, I'm curious from your perspective, because you were a participant before you worked with them. What was that experience like as a participant for the first time?
As a participant, or as being someone on the other side of things?
Maybe both.
as a participant, I think as a Montrealer too, C2 it just had an aura, and I think you attend it for the first time and you're like, what is this? You don't know what to expect until you walk onto the site and you're like, holy shit, this is totally not what I ever imagined. And the craziest part is that I live near where the site was, so every year I would see it being built, And one of the years that I went prior to joining the team, I was like, this is where did this come from? This was like a bike path 3 weeks ago. So I think when you get on site, there's something that just takes your breath away, and you feel that you're transported into another universe as a participant. And it's amazing how you as an individual feel, because all of a sudden it's like we're not in Kansas anymore, So you're tempted to look around and reach out and do things. So as a former participant, you feel that. And I guess as now someone who's on the other side of the curtain, it's wonderful and exciting to see how much effort is put into creating this universe. To be able to visit the site while it's being built is unbelievable, to see how all those pieces come together. And that first morning of showtime, when we arrive at 6 a.m. and the sun is creeping up and you're walking through and like there's still the dew of the morning everywhere, and it's like you imagine what that place is going to look like in a few hours when thousands of people are discovering this wonderful site for the first time. And you just hope in your hopes of hopes that they will see all of the beauty and wonder that everyone built, like those plants getting pushed into place at the last minute and being fluffed up. There's just something wonderful. And being on the internal side, watching the participants arrive that first morning and just seeing the looks on their faces was like, yeah, this is what I do.
So it didn't ruin the magic seeing how it actually comes to life?
I feel if anything, it added to it, because then you see the fruits of people's labor. And as I said, it takes a village, and you need to respect and appreciate that, Yeah,
absolutely. So I want to ask for you, what were your highlights this year? What do you think really stood out this past year?
Oh my God, there's so many things. I have to be honest, I wasn't able to do most of the collaborative experiences or experiential brainstormings because I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off. But I have to admit that sitting in our 360 big top and watching the lights go up and the countdown music gave me shivers. I think a bunch of us had tears because it was so like just, whoa, this is wild. So that was definitely like the thrill of that was a definite highlight for me. Naturally, I really enjoyed Snoop Dogg's conference just because I found that it was, he had a lot of really interesting things to say, and he was very generous with his conversation and did a lot of Q&As with the audience, which was really interesting. And like, he's just super cool. And I grew up listening to his music, so I admit I fangirled a little bit at that moment. But just also the vibe of the plaza when everyone was out. We were so fortunate with such wonderful weather, and there was just like a heartbeat. Like I remember walking across the plaza to go and meet different people or give people tours of the site, and there was just this energy. And I think that for me, that was one of the most wonderful things. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a beautiful day. The sun's out and it's just buzzing. People are having conversations. They're smiling. It's like you feel an energy, and it's so wonderful. So even though some of the experiences themselves, I wasn't able to go deep, but just the vibe in and of itself was like so rich, so wonderful. So like, wow, this is what we do,
Now, being on the side where you actually, social media is a big part of what you do, what did you see was the biggest response that participants had? What did they respond to a lot? I
think people loved hearing from those great business voices. We had Frank Cooper. We did an interview with him on our social channels. People just went wild. People loved hearing from so many of those inspiring voices that were at C2. We also did some live content that we did online with some Facebook Lives where we actually brought some of our collaborative methodologies to social media. That was something that perhaps people that weren't able to attend the event were able to partake in and enjoy and be inspired from some of the learnings from the event. Our social media channels were just on fire. During the 3 days of the event. People are engaging, they're commenting, they're sharing, they're posting photos. Like, it's just, our community is just so present and alive, and naturally it might create a lot of FOMO for those that aren't around, but it's also a really visually stunning site. So it means that those social images they get shared like wildfire.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that there's what people are living, the experience, having a brainstorming meeting on a boat on the canal is like something that got shared a lot. So our social community is just super active in sharing the vibe, the knowledge that they're learning, the people that they're meeting. It's wonderful to see.
It's funny because the way that you describe this event, it's just like, oh my God, I have to be there. But A lot of times you kind of think about this event as, from the inside out, it's really difficult to explain, and from the
Mhm.
outside in, it's really difficult to understand. But the way you've described it, like, I get it. Like, it's like I'm there. I'm right there with you, and I have not been. So it's really fascinating to kind of think about how those messages get shared on social media
Mhm.
and that FOMO factor. How does that play into the marketing for the event?
Well, as the person who leads at marketing, arriving here a year ago is like, how am I going to tell the story of this event? And it's still a challenge because so much of what you experience in life is hard to put into a marketing campaign. But I think that there are so many things that C2 does well that we also have to trust that our community also can become a big part of our marketing and our communication to the world at large. Naturally, we have some not very scientific approaches, but naturally marketing is a mix of art and science. So leveraging data to make sure that we're telling the right stories to the right audiences to engage them. I think also a lot of talking about what we do is important. C2 is a little bit hard to grasp, but as I hope I've been able to explain, there's actually something really tangible there. So one of my big goals and my raison d'être is to really make sure that I'm able to convey those messages and have new people understand what it is that we do and how it is worth the investment of time to come to C2, because when you're finished your 3-day adventure with us, and hopefully you stay for our awesome party, you walk away and you're like, in the moment, it's like, oh, stimulation. But then you're like, wait a second, I learned this, I met that person, or I can apply this to my everyday, or I can bring this back to my teams, and I can be like, wait a second, guys, let's take a step back and look at it this way. That through all of that, there is a tremendous amount of value. And perhaps at first it seems like it might be really frivolous, but at the end of the day, there is a lot of substance that comes out of this. And hopefully that's the message that I can get across to the masses so that they as well would join us on our crazy adventure of business transformation.
I think that's a goal that a lot of event professionals have for their own meetings, is how to create those tangible moments while still being exciting and different and getting people to get out of their comfort zones and experience something. That experience design is so important right now and something that we're talking about so much. You said that you're already starting on next year. Without giving away your biggest secrets, what are you most excited about for next year?
I'm really excited to see what the site's going to look like. I'm fortunate to be able to see some of the scoops in advance, but I think you don't really see it until it's actually all put together and you're standing there and you're like, wow, this is it. I'm really excited for the programming that our programming team has put together. We announced our first speaker last week. It feels like a long time ago, but it was just last week. So Spike Lee is going to be joining us as one of our speakers. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of the types of people and conversations that are going to be had. So I think, as always, we're going to try to challenge people by bringing them voices that they're familiar with, but also exposing them to perhaps people that they might be less familiar with, but that are doing tremendous work to help us answer some of the challenges of business in the future. That's always a really exciting part for me. And of course, the environment design as well. But I think it's going to be a pretty awesome addition. And I think we're, as a team, internally, everyone is working very hard to pull something together that's going to, once again, take people out of their comfort zones, but challenge the way that we see things, that we think about things, that we communicate and work together as well. So it's coming together really nicely, and we're starting to see some awesome stuff like being pieced together. So,
I mean, I want to go.
I hope you do. It's in May. It's at the end of May. It's the 22nd to the 24th. So you can already put it on your calendar. Montreal is a great city to visit. We have an excellent restaurant scene. May in Montreal is like the leaves are out. It's just fabulous. So it's a good time to be in Montreal. And I mean, C2 is happening. So
I mean, you already answered my next question, which is gonna be, for next year, where and when can people attend? So yeah, that's excellent. So, if this is something that's now on your bucket list, or if this is the first time you've heard of C2 Montreal, maybe you should look into it more because it sounds incredible.
follow us on social media, C2 Montreal on Facebook, on
Yes.
LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, c2montreal.com. Check us out, have conversations with us. Our teams are working like mad. Our editorial team is constantly putting out content based on a lot of the thought leadership and ideas that came out of the 2018 edition, but also continuing the conversation around a lot of the big issues on business. So actually this month in November, we have a full package on thought leadership and how you as an individual can enrich your thought leadership to help you rise and shine as a leader within your own business. So, tapping into our ecosystem of speakers and of moderators to bring a lot of that knowledge to people. It's important that we really deliver on our mission to help drive business forward. So come and check us out, hang out with us online, and then come and see us in May in Montreal.
Now, I know that Meeting Professionals International has done some behind-the-scenes stuff, bringing some event professionals to C2 Montreal to kind of get that experience and learn from the stuff that you're doing. For someone who's an event professional, who maybe, they get to go to one event a year for some inspiration, what can you tell them for how to get the most out of their experience at C2 Montreal if they were to go?
Use your concierge. So our concierge service doesn't only work on the site, but they also help a lot of our participants prepare for their journey before the event. So use and abuse of that service. It's really important that you understand the programming. I know that more and more now events of the scale of C2 multi-track events ask a lot of their participants to study the programming and decide what you want to do. And I know that it's super labor intensive, especially when you're a really busy person, but sometimes the 10 minutes that it might take you, it will allow you to really pick the things that you need to do and see that will help drive your business needs further. And there's something for everyone at C2. And if there is one word of advice that I could give to people is try something that you wouldn't usually try either. Do that thing that you're like, oh, that's so not me, because you might be surprised. It might actually be the thing that you're like, you know what, that actually changed my perspective on X or Y,
That's good. Because I think a lot of times when event professionals, we do get the opportunity to go to some place for inspiration of things to bring back to our own meetings. I think sometimes it can be overwhelming. And I think sometimes we're really super critical also because we are event professionals and we're like, that could have been done differently or, but I think every event professional I've talked to who has gone to C2, I don't hear those same things. It feels like a different experience for them. It really is all about that inspiration factor and, what are the types of things that they can really bring back to their meeting, which I think is important to recognize the ability for event professionals to attend this event and really get something tangible out of it.
I think the important thing is that if the event professionals that are listening to this show right now, if you do come to C2, naturally, we always welcome the critical eye. So yes, you might see something that the rigger didn't do properly or, a curtain that's not where it needs to be or whatnot, but come to it with the open mind of understanding what we're doing, live it as a participant, but also look at how the participants are living it as well. And sometimes observation is probably one of the most powerful tools that you could have. And it might give you an insight that you might never have thought to have before.
I think that's really valuable. I think, and you know what, on that note, I don't want to ruin that. That was really good. If you could only pick one piece of advice, and it doesn't necessarily have to be related to C2, but what is your one tip that you have for event planners?
Think of the people that are coming to your event. Forget about all the rest of the noise. You want to be cool. You want to be innovative. You want to be better than everyone else. Put the human being that's going to be there in front of your decision making. They're the only thing that matters. All the other KPIs will flow through if you put the human at the middle of everything.
Great. And I know I asked you kind of before we started the show, do you have any like new and cool resources you want to share? Any websites, blogs, books, gadgets? Like, what do you do what do you use as your inspiration?
I read way too much, like, and everything. And I think one of the things that I try to do is to not become so insular within the industry that I work in. So yes, it's important to know what's going on and read sort of the trade publications in our business, but I think it's important to have an open mind and look around the world. Perhaps because I'm a former media person. I'm curious about the world around me, so I read the economic papers and I read the fashion magazines and I read culture and pop culture stuff. You need to kind of understand the world, what's going on around you, because we have to understand the reality of the people that are coming to our events. So quite often what inspires me most is not what we do in our event, but it's what's happening in other industries and other things that people are doing in industries that might have to reach younger audiences and constantly need to be reinventing themselves. And, you know, I think inspiration doesn't come from one source. It comes from curiosity and being open-minded. So if I could give people advice on that, it's just read it all.
And what are your favorite ones to read? Like, what do you read on a regular weekly basis?
You don't even want to get me started. We'd be here until 10 o'clock at night. Everything. Like literally. From The Economist to Ad Age to Marketing Magazine to Fast Company to Vogue to Refinery 29 to random influencer blogs, just everything. Reading PCMA, reading, you know, a ton of stuff, and every week it's different. I guess it kind of depends on what problem do I need to solve this week, or what thing do I want to discover today. And I mean, the web is at our fingertips, so we can basically find anything we want. And let yourself go down the rabbit hole of information. Click on those links and read more by the same author. It will, sometimes you'll discover things that you might not have even known existed.
Awesome. There you have it. Read everything.
Everything.
Everything. No, that's really fantastic. I think some of those, you know, I read some of those myself, and I think those are great examples of.
I know that you're a fan of Vogue, so.
I am actually, yes. Team Vogue. They have some great stuff.
Great publication.
They are. Thank you again so much for joining us. I think, you know, for those who are new to C2 Montreal and never heard of the event before, to those who have heard of it, I think this is a whole new perspective on the event. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
For those watching at home, thank you, or at the office, thank you for joining us on Facebook and on event-icons.com. This show is recorded live each Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You can watch behind the scenes as we go live a couple minutes early on Facebook Live. We also release the podcast the following Tuesday after every show on iTunes, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. And of course, you can always go to event-icons.com to watch the replay every following Tuesday, along with show notes and links to the resources that were shared. The best way to join us is live on event-icons.com. And if you sign up, you now just get to go to the website and watch it live. You don't have to log in anywhere. It's great. And we want to know what you think. So join us on Twitter using the hashtag EventIcons, or join the EventIcons Facebook group. We ask questions and we have conversations there every week. And also let us know what icons you want to be on the show. So again, Julia, thank you for joining us. And for those of you at home, we will see you next week on Event Icons.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway.
And join the social conversation. Sponsored by Little Bird Told Media.
Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.